Captain Nathaniel Brand.
I took the brief period I had in transit to go over the prepared information for this meeting one last time. The nematorium sociality was unique in that they did not have a need for language between themselves, instead opting to speak in the language of whoever they were talking to, as they were capable of making any sounds necessary. They also went through great efforts to not have any images or descriptions of themselves available to outsiders. Actually, meeting one in person was a delicate occasion, requiring top secrecy and extensive non-disclosure measures. They otherwise publicly conducted themselves using robotic intermediaries. They were interested in forming an alliance with us against the overwhelming Gratonian forces. Their front lines are locked in a standstill, and we have the power to tip the scales in their favor if we take an offensive stance. But that also means putting ourselves at risk with our already exceedingly low number of trained personnel and combat-capable ships. By now I had descended far enough to see the governor's sprawling estate. It had changed drastically in the small amount of time we've been here, now sporting orbital defense cannons and laser anti-munition systems. My lander was piloting itself down to the newly created landing zone, where I could make out the nematorian transport that sneaked during their distraction. It was a fairly featureless tube of metal, prioritizing function over form with its bleak gray casing and complete lack of windows. It was also incredibly small outside of the necessary spacefaring equipment. Trying to fit a human in there would be equivalent to locking them up in a coffin. A couple of Meldrin greeted me at the landing zone and led me through the halls of the mansion into an underground section. My communication implant clued me in that this area was completely shielded from external signals, preventing the risk of the discussion being prematurely leaked before reaching a final decision. This portion of the building was much less lavish in its presentation compared to the above-ground side, opting for polished concrete and intense fluorescent lights over the usual quartz gold and rich wood walls. We reached a set of metal doors at the end of the hall leading to the meeting room. My guides told me that I was free to enter, but that the governor would be arriving slightly later as she was on a tight schedule. I decided that I should take the time to acquaint myself with this mystery spokesperson, since we would be discussing the futures of our people in mere minutes. They opened the doors and had me step into the airlock-style connector before closing behind me with a reverberating clang. I understood the need for utmost confidentiality, but this setup kept on giving me ominous vibes. The other door automatically opened on itself with the tumbling of machinery permeating through the walls, introducing me to a dimly lit and humid room. The only source of light was a ceiling lamp illuminating a metal table in the center, leaving the walls and ceiling blanketed in darkness. It took a few moments for my eyes to adjust before I truly understood the horror story I had just walked into. Innumerous thin red strands masked the walls near me in an organic lattice, weaving over themselves and subtly undulating with nauseating vitality. They were tracing the frame of the door through which I had entered, silently threatening that they had the ability to close me in should they so desire. I noticed them carpeting the floor, moving out of the way of my steps so as not to be trampled upon. Some strands broke off from the netting and licked the air like the tongue of a snake. I traced the strands along the walls to the far end of the room, noting how they grew in width and density along the way. I couldn't see past the dust and mist in the air reflecting the light from above, though maybe that was a blessing in this situation. The walls seemingly started to vibrate, millions of threads trembling in unison at specific frequencies, flicking against the air in whip-like fashion to create popping and clicking, scraping against each other in calculated movements. A voice was produced, one belonging to the deepest region of the uncanny valley. A chorus of strained, raspy vocalizations belonging to no particular walk of life, cascading from every angle with the intent of communication. "Ah, you are alone. Was human Dominique not able to attend?" Deep breath. "I am the guest here, the alien in their world. Adapting to situations most would not be comfortable in is an aspect of my duty. This is not a monster. It is a person. One that I am to treat with respect, and I am to accommodate their uniqueness." Pioneer Dominique's attendance was indeed informally requested by this individual, though it couldn't be arranged since he wasn't in our custody during preparations. Before I could begin to answer, it spoke again. "Oh, where are my manners? I am Nematorian Ol Neatiri, spokesbeing of the Nematorium Sociality. Please disregard my previous query. That request was selfish in nature anyway. You must be Captain Nathaniel Brand if I am not mistaken. The original raspy chorus had been slowly evolving into a tighter, more natural-sounding voice, as if Awel was getting accustomed to speaking human language. The tone had also picked up, going from one of dismay to chipper, yet formal. This shift lifted the mood of the room along with it, making the search for my own voice not nearly as colossal of an endeavor as it had been moments ago. Yes, you are correct. Please excuse me for my hesitation in speaking. I take no offense to it, really. In fact, this is comparatively one of the most pleasant introductions I've had during my time in service. There have been occasions of people completely freezing up upon seeing me or even fainting. Those were truly terrible incidents, sometimes requiring me to touch them so they could be lifted out of the room. The room shivered upon Owl's mentioning of touch, the strands near me backing away an inch before slowly refilling the space they had taken up. Do you have an aversion to physical contact? Absolutely. It's quite ironic, too, considering so many cultures have depictions of creatures like us being the touchy ones, but in reality it is quite the contrary. We share the same fears for your body type as you do for ours. Isn't that a fascinating coincidence? I was experiencing whiplash by this point. Awel was borderline eccentric in their attitude, completely subverting the expectations I had formed upon witnessing their appearance. They were also startlingly emotive when speaking, their body lifting and wilting during the ups and downs of their speech, growing taut during exclamations and licking the air more than usual during questions. And while listening to Awel's chattering was slowly starting to become enjoyable, we were ultimately here for political business. I heard the outside door of the airlock open, signaling Governor Sin's arrival. Moments later, the inner door swung open, followed by the governor stepping into the room, carrying a wad of documents in her hands. Captain Brand, you're here early. Though I can't seem to spot the diplomat. She froze entirely, her eyes still locked onto mine as she became aware of her periphery. The papers fell from her hand and spread across the floor, being caught and organized by the carpet of tendrils monopolizing the area.
Avalon.
Anxiety pervaded me as I watched Captain Brand disappear into the shielded tunnels. He wants me to be the one to reach out and make amends, to act professionally and put my feelings aside. I've displayed nothing but utmost professionalism during my interactions with Dominique. He's the one that bit back at me, acting like I was a monster trying to control him. Never has the captain been so cruel in his orders, but now he wasn't even bothering with the situation, treating the ordeal as if it were a squabble between children. Ugh. Shifting my attention over to Dominique, I found him still lounging in the room I had him sent to. Highway to Hell was blasting through the room's speakers, loud enough to give temporary deafness to those with unmodified ears. Fortunately, nobody was in near proximity, but there was no doubt that he was still disturbing everyone on that half of the ship. I quickly turned it down to a low hum, much to his dismay. Not a great start. Dominique, the captain wants you planetside for a checkup and therapy. I've marked you a spot on the next outgoing transport. That was my therapy you just muted, asshole. Oh, could you please supply the study proving ancient rock music's therapeutic benefits? Sarcasm was not the correct path for mending a relationship, but it was difficult to keep a calm mind when every word of his chafed against my patience. The captain's exact order didn't necessarily specify expected results, but perhaps at least some sort of effort should be made. Listen, Dominique, Captain plans for us to be working together in the future. He requested that I repair our relationship, and considering I'm only still here with his permission, I'd like to somehow get that done. Could you at least tell me where to start? I'm a bit new to this. He took on a look of contemplation, glancing around the room and searching for nothing in particular. He seemed distant, likely preoccupied with his own thoughts. After a few moments, his shoulders slumped along with a sigh. Look, man, right. I nodded, using the surveillance camera. The last couple days have been the most stressful period of my entire damn life. I just have too much shit to sift through in my head, and having someone like you poking in does no favors. You want to start? Stay the hell away from my head and just leave me alone for now. Will you be attending the Yes, I will, god damn. Satisfied with that, I moved on to the next task the captain left me with, the alien that Dominique kept in tow. He'd referred to him as Dokchara. Normally, tedious safety procedures would need to be taken to allow a foreign individual onto this ship, but I wasn't going to enforce those after he had personally vouched for the alien. I found him also still in the room I had sent them to. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands held together on his lap while he stared down into nothingness. The food that had been delivered to his room shortly after their arrival, a medley of roasted vegetables accompanied by rice, sat untouched on the table in the room. He had been supplied with clothes using the scanned measurements, but they were left in a corner of the room while he was still in his dirty, burnt and torn guard uniform. Quickly skimming through the room's recordings, I found that he hadn't moved from that position this entire time, barring walking to the door to receive his food. "Dochara, can you hear me?" That at least got him to look up slightly, but he didn't offer a verbal response. I needed him to be more cooperative than this, and I really didn't want to have to send people to drag him out and onto the transport. "Dochara, please respond. I'm trying to get help for you." "Help me. A bit late for that, yeah."
Captain Nathaniel Brand.
And it's no secret that the Meldrin system is a bit sparse when it comes to heavy metals. As outlined in the contract, we aren't asking you to reveal the secrets of your weaponry. We just want your guaranteed participation on this side in exchange for these materials. Awell's pitch was solid. It's true that our prospecting efforts returned poor results, and although they had no way of knowing this, our elemental transmutation process required immense amounts of energy and logistical ability. The required warp network and Dyson sphere needed to achieve even minimal production were not only months away in the list of projects to get done, but they also required the heavy metals that we are so lacking in, resulting in a catch-22 scenario. The inclusion of not needing to divulge our technology was also an appealing clause. The lab coats observed a strange phenomenon when comparing our technology to what the alien races had available. They theorized that because these races were able to directly observe alien life early in their development, thanks to being part of this cluster of life, the majority of their history was spent studying space travel instead of warfare. To them, nuclear fission was the byproduct of developing rocket propulsion, while for us, it was a result of and solution to one of our many wars.